Warning, please be advised. This show is unorthodox, real, raw, and radically unscripted. And despite the fact being straight off the top of my head, I, as the host, put the utmost effort into choosing the language I use as carefully as I can. Words matter, friends. That does not mean I'm trying to be a gatekeeper and demand that language not change. All language is common use. All I'm advocating for is thoughtful, mindful, aware understanding of how we use the language.
Good morning, Trumptopia. A special segment of the almost daily ZenCast. Hosted by the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Let's talk Trump.
Good afternoon, good morning, and good night to you, and welcome. Namaste to all listeners from around the world. Thank you for tuning in. Please join me in a journey both backwards and forwards through time as we discuss the absurdities and the hypocrisies and the neurolinguistic curiosities of this Trumptopian movement happening, and as we dig deeper than the surface arguments being had. Before we start off, I just want to cleanse my own palate and enjoy a little bit of DJZ music. I might drop some thoughts and words in it because I've been encouraged to make sure that my music isn't just music on the podcast, or else my podcast might be in violation of the EULA because of some weird interpretation of what they mean by just music only episodes. But I'm being snarky. For those of you who know recent Trumptopia podcast history, there was an incident with the main originating hosting platform, Sprecher.com. But I have no chip on my shoulder. I'm a huge fan. Sprecher.com, thank you for working with me to resolve the issue and to reinstate my nearly 7 years worth of Good Morning Trumptopia podcast episodes. If you're looking, by the way, for those episodes, please be advised, dear listeners, I am about 3/4 of the way through of reorganizing the almost daily ZenCast experience. If you're listening on any of the distributor platforms, such as Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Good Pods, CastBox, Deezer, Podcast Addict, Podchaser, GeoSavan, or any of the other smaller ones, please stand by as the special segments that I've been slowly spinning off into their own podcast show will very soon be submitted for publication and distribution to those platforms. In the meantime, actually, my flow is going to be generally to post 30% of any of the special segment episodes premiering here on the main branch of the show, the main trunk of the tree, the Almost Daily ZenCast. And then they will be migrated after a few days or weeks or a month or so into the episode or the segment-specific sub-series of podcast shows. If you'd like to check all of that out right now as it stands, 3/4 of the way through the reorganization process, please come on by and visit Sprecher.com/user/Mr. Zeppo. There you will be able to take a deep dive into the individual special segment miniseries that comprise the many components of the Almost Daily ZenCast including, but not limited to, as I've not finished the spinning off process, Cannabis Talk 420, Good Morning Trumptopia, the Squad Teamwork Guild Command Radio Center Radio Briefings podcast. That doesn't have the word radio as many times in it as I just said. Today's Nugget of Zen, unauthorized and explicit readings, and of course the one segment of the show that is, and I have to put more disclaimers about this, that segment of the show is acknowledged and intentionally meant to be fiction. It is world-building, literary development, fiction content. That's the Zeppoverse world-building project. So come on by and check them out by stopping by at this link, sprecher.com/user/Mr. Zeppo. Now, if you want to take a deep dive into just the Nugget of Zen episodes, you can find them nice and easy, etc., etc. And there's still a few other special series that I want to spin out, including, but not limited to, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo's totally irrelevant media reviews, and a couple other ones whose names completely just disappeared from my brain. Anyways, we're going to take a moment today to talk about language, particularly in the context of the Trumtopian versus American pseudo-psychological culture wars. And I put giant, heavy-handed, massive bunny ears of irritated sarcasm all over that label. And we're going to take a deeper dive. I'm not here to say that group is right and that group is wrong. If you're coming to listen to my show thinking you're going to fight with me or prove me wrong because you are projecting that I'm saying your group is wrong and this other group is right, you need to stop and check yourself. Leave your baggage at the door or you will wreck yourself as you dig through these nearly 7 years worth of podcast episodes. That's not my game. To borrow the line from the television classic, Homie, don't play that. Sorry, the name of the show just dropped out of my head. That happens to me, I mean no disrespect. Please be advised, if at any moment or time it sounds like I don't know what I'm talking about. I know what I'm talking about usually. My brain is just like, error, file card not found. Like, I know this person by sight, but I can't remember their name. That happens to me all the time. One of the pitfalls of being real, raw, and radically unscripted. Now, despite how many times Johnny-come-lately weirdo hate trolls come on my social media and tell me that I'm just a deep state, blind sheeple shill for... I've been accused of being everything from a CIA agent to, a Russian operative. It's absurd. All of them, though, patently obvious boilerplate, prefabricated, supposed attempts at insults. I've been on the internet since before AOL existed, okay? On a nearly daily basis. I've been having conversations with all kinds of people from all around the world for over 30 some odd years. I don't know the exact number because I haven't looked up when let's do that right now, live on the air. I don't usually like looking up stuff because that interrupts my flow, but when did AOL first launch? May 24th, 1985. When AOL launched, I was already a well-established, that's a poor choice of words because I don't know what that means in the internet. But I was already a well-versed daily citizen of the internet. Because believe it or not, there was internet before AOL. So, it's absurd to me and quite laughable when people accuse me of being all kinds of silly things that I'm not. Now, over in the Zeppoverse world-building project, if I was writing a scene like this, my next bit of dialogue would be about how I am actually a living artificial cybernetic service being from another dimension that's been trapped here on your planet for the last 60 years. But that's neither here nor there. This is not a Zeboverse world-building project, but I do share that just as a pique interest. For those of you who are curious, I'm trying to create a future post-dystopian sci-fi action-adventure societal, political satire book series. So, a lot of my real-world opinions about what's going on now are seminal and very informative to what I'm developing in the book series. And the book series is, of course, intended to be, in the long tradition of sci-fi, a criticism of what's happening now. Not, as many people take it, a prediction of what might happen in the future. Believe it or not. Although science fiction has had a knack for seemingly identifying things that do end up developing in the future, almost every author, in their own words, that I've ever looked into, reading about, who's like, oh, what are you doing with your work? They're like, I'm criticizing the state of our world now. But I digress. Despite all the weird, absurd, and patently easily proven false accusations of being something that I'm not, trust me, I'm broke AF, dude. I don't have some billionaire corporate interest backing me, unlike most of our politicians. I'm not a trust fund baby. That's another thing I've been accused of being. I'm neither a race traitor nor a gender traitor. Another thing that people have accused me of. And that makes me wonder, if misogyny and racism aren't real, why have so many agitated, triggered AF white men accused me of being a gender traitor and a race traitor? Put a pin on that shit up on the corkboard. All right, for those of you who do not know, the corkboard is a mental tool by which we track, just like in the memes, we track all the things we've talked about and collect interrelated subject matter near each other and start connecting dots. That's sort of like your homework. Not that it's I hate that word. I don't want you to feel like this podcast has homework. But that's for you to sort of cultivate that in your head. Tragically, I don't actually have a corkboard with all the things on it. I have a corkboard, and it lights up neon green. You can see it on my live streamcast, which I've lately mostly been using for video game, content creation, but I will very promptly be integrating or reintegrating this podcast show. I want to do it and cosplay it as my literary science fiction character, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Now, I know that for many people that'll be confusing and or reason to dismiss what I have to say. Ironically, a lot of those same people are claiming that there are deep-coded messages in movie, and or everything in movies is evil brainwashing. Good grief. Let me share with you one of my pillars in my world philosophy. Absolutist statements are almost never absolutely true. I'll let you ponder that for a hot second while we take a quick listen to Emergent Patterns Discordantly Dancing. The rest of the title is cut off, DJ Zed. I'm so sad when that happens on this display. But here we go. Let's enjoy a little bit of the DJ Zed Discotheque Synthetica, robot rock music from the literary multiverse of the Zeboverse. One of the curious details about Discotheque Synthetica is that human beings are incapable of hearing the frequency that the robots sing their lyrics in. So for all you humans that are not artificial living creatures made of mechanical cybernetic parts, you probably cannot hear the deeply thought-provoking and societally satirical lyrics embedded in this track, which is deeply unfortunate. But the search goes on to find a translator to transpose all these things and then recreate the songs with a lyricist and a vocalist. Please stand by for that project. Which prompts me to think, if you're a collaborative-minded, yet-to-be-discovered lyricist and or vocalist who digs the vibe and can imagine composing lyrics to the DJ Zed Muzak presented here on this show, please, oh please do DM me directly on any of my social media, identifying yourself as such and explaining why you're writing to me. Don't just write to me, hey, and don't explain what you're about. Always, please. When people just write to me and start having weirdly random and casually familiar sounding conversation, I'm usually concerned that it's all a scam, because in my over 30 years experience of being on the internet and being DM'd by people, I mean, I was getting DM'd by scammers before we invented the word DM. But I digress. Call to action. Lyricists and vocalists interested in helping develop the Zepoverse, and specifically the missing element to the Discotheque Synthetica, please do contact me. You can find my social media over on solo.to/Mr. Zebo. Snow. You think you know what it is. Clearly, when the word enters your ear canals and is processed by the synapses in your soggy bacon brain, you get an instant image, right? Or association, or association to a memory, or something like that, right? Snow. Now, this is an episode about language and about why it matters. Again, I'm not trying to be a gatekeeper. I'm not trying to say everyone must talk the same. I am saying it is important that we make an effort to try and understand each other and to try and understand the language we are using as best as possible. I'm not trying to create a classist structure about what kind of language is the best. That's nonsense. I'm trying to say that, like, it's incumbent on all of us to always be expanding our vocabulary and refining our understanding of the words we use. Here's why. I mean, this is an innocuous example. Snow. In English, we have one word for it. The Inuits of Alaska and the northern tundras have as many as 52 different terms. Now, for someone who doesn't live in Arctic climates, that might be completely useless information. Snow is snow, especially if you never see it. But when it comes to the culture wars that the society is caught up in, and it's most outrageously on display in America. But dear friends, let us remember that no nation is isolated. No, just like no man or woman or they, them, non-conforming individual is an island unto themselves, no nation is isolated from the rest of the world. Now, that is, people will say, will jump on any little tiny thing like that and then accuse me of being a globalist. No. Y'all need to stop trying to accuse me of being the things you've been programmed to accuse people of being so that you can righteously judge them as being unworthy of being listened to. And maybe, just maybe, try listening to what's actually being said. This is why words matter, friends. When we don't understand the words we are using, the words we're promoting, the language we are adopting from the sources we're getting it from, when we do that to ourselves, it becomes exponentially harder for us to understand when we fall into ego traps and make hypocrites of ourselves. I mean, a nice, simple, clean example is how, and I know I pick on the GOP and the right wing a lot, okay? I just posted an episode about that. It was a lost recording, a recording I had made that I had intended to like redraft a while back, and then I just didn't, so I just uploaded it when I found it. I don't even remember what I said on that, but I stand by my words because when I sit down to make a podcast, I invoke like the root of my authenticity. But that's a pin on the corkboard. I've already, did a bit of a talk about what I do to prepare to present each and every single podcast. Okay, so the GOP calls itself, proclaims itself, especially to itself. In other words, the GOP as a party, now there's multiple components. It isn't one unified whole, right? I'm not into making absolutist statements. So whenever I make broad, generalized statements, it must be understood that I have previously acknowledged. And this awareness is incorporated in my statement, the reality that absolutist statements are almost never absolutely true, okay? But the GOP declares itself to its own people to be the party of Christ. Now, this is why their actions, their behaviors, their projections, their hypocrisies, their lies, their manipulation of their own base really sticks in my craw and irritates the living bejesus out of me. Because Christ would not approve of what the GOP is doing. Full stop. And the only people, in my humble opinion, that would argue that he would are those that don't actually understand Christ's words on a spiritual, phenomenological level, but rather are caught up in blind faith belief attachment to ideological mental constructs of dogmatic, prescribed, neurolinguistically controlled, programmatic thinking. Now, I'm not trying to accuse all religious people of being brainwashed. That's absurd. And we need to unpack that word to get to a really hard set of bitter pills to swallow. All life forms are programmable beings. Language is the programming code. That's why words matter. That's why understanding words authentically, deeply, truthfully matters. Now, you want to talk slang or localized colloquialisms. You want to talk, to borrow terminology, ghetto or upper crust. You want to be posh. You want to be, what's the British opposite of posh? There's a thing. But anyways, that's fine. Those are all stylistic choices. I'm not here to judge the style of language. I'm here to promote a deeper, more mindful understanding of language. And this is one of the most critical examples I can bring to the table about this, right? Snow, totally innocuous. the GOP and the way it has turned itself into a hypocrisy machine, that's an incredibly urgent example from our current political context here in the United States of America / Trumptopia. Because it's still quite it's still quite a story of two imaginary nations cohabiting in one literal space. Put a pin on the corkboard about that issue. We've already talked about it before. We will come full circle and talk about it again. Here is an example. I'm all inclusive, folks. Here's an example from the more spiritual, esoteric, metaphysical end of the spectrum, which has a pretty interestingly weird Venn diagram overlap with the right wing, because there's a lot of obviously the right wing political machine is deeply embedded with Christianity as a broad term, and also in more particular specific sense, evangelical Christianity, and in its most egregious rearing of ugly hypocritical actions with the Christian white nationalist community. Okay, but there's an example of how language is being skewed and misused in this purely esoteric sense, and this does overlap because you see a lot of supposed right-wing spiritual Christians and or non-religious right-wingers talking this way as well. But this issue is not a right-wing issue, my friends. But let me get to this example. There's a lot of inflammatory and misleading and very dangerous content or talk out there, messaging about fighting the Matrix, destroying the Matrix, tearing down the Matrix, escaping the Matrix, hacking the Matrix, etc. Now, I've done an episode or two about this. I've talked about this in several episodes. I'm bringing it up now as part of this discussion here because I think it's very, very pertinent. So let me just get to the point and not ramble about it too much. Almost everyone using the Matrix in that way, the term the Matrix, is obviously influenced by the movie, and also is obviously unaware of the fact that postmodern use of the term Matrix is massively divorced, and I would argue maybe intentionally misleading, away from the original, ancient, spiritual, esoteric definition as understood by by our indigenous ancestors who developed the term in the first place. I hate to break it to anybody and everybody out there that's ever reposted a meme saying you got to escape, hack, destroy, etc. the Matrix. Y'all are being manipulated into using the wrong word or a word incorrectly, a terminology, which means something really specific is being misapplied. And this matters not only for intellectual clarity reasons, but for esoteric spiritual reasons, which we've taken a deep dive into and we'll take a deep dive into again, I'm sure, in the not too distant future. But to just put a nice, fine, crisp edge on it, the Matrix, in its true, authentic, ancient definition, identifies the divine mother womb that is gestating, literally nurturing and getting ready to give birth to all of life. Now, there are some deep, deep thoughts to unpack from that set of statements. But the point here is, imagine apple seeds in the center of a healthy, ripening apple that are not yet ready to be spread across the earth and sprout up into their own trees, having a discussion about how they must destroy the apple. Doesn't make any effing sense, does it? If those apple seeds destroy the apple, they will not themselves come to fruition. They will not be able to successfully live their lives. All right. Okay, let's step back. Language, it matters. How we use it and or get confused and or manipulated into misusing it matters. Now, it's easy to get distracted by surface level details, like how to pronounce certain words. That's fun. Lots of stand-up comedians have done bits about it. How some words sound like other words even though they're spelled completely differently, or how two words that are spelled almost exactly the same sound radically, insanely different. That's all fun and adorable. But I'm talking about the impact of the misuse of the meaning of a term. When we hypernormalize misunderstanding a word or a terminology or a cloud of words, which is what we call a concept, that only benefits those who are instigating and profiteering on these so-called culture wars. And let me tell you something. Whoever they aren't the people everyone's pointing fingers and blaming at, right? If you know their face and their names and you can shout your screes and, about them, then they're just scapegoats. Now, I take this a bit further in my thesis or in my hypothesis. There's a lot of blame-laying, finger-pointing, accusations going around, right? And it is here in the United States. I can't speak for other countries, but here in the United States, it is unfortunately the self-proclaimed, self-righteous party of Christ and freedom fighting that is most egregiously involved in this kind of misuse of language. Does the left do it too? Sure. Absolutely. But does the left pretend to be Christ's army? No. But I digress. If we do not help each other identify and understand these kinds of linguistic obstacles, we will never be able to unify, collaborate, communicate, and develop solutions to the problems that we ourselves have created. And I don't know about you, but taking a really hard look at everything and all the options and all the possible outcomes, I am much more interested in solving the problems than I am in destroying the opposition, owning the other side, humiliating those who disagree with me. Those are useless endeavors in the face of the problems we've created. And it's gotten to the exaggerated place where, in terms of the engineer wedge issue politics here in Trumptopia / America, that everyone's arguing past each other, even when they are talking about the same subject, right? But at a larger scale, both sides are worked up about a set of things that don't always match up with each other, especially on the right. The right has become the party not just of hypocritical, not as the GOP, the Trumptopian GOP. And mind you, Trump didn't cause this. Trump, as I've pointed out forever, from the beginning of this podcast, Trump is a symptomology, not a cause. Put a pin on the corkboard there. I've tried to unpack that before. I'm sure I will have to unpack that again. Trump is a symptomology, not a cause. Let that percolate and sink into your contemplations. I've been observing the political tug of war in this country since 1984. Okay? I'm not a Johnny-come-lately to politics. I've been questioning this bizarre, seemingly, one step forward, two steps back, social tug-of-war, performative battle between the left and the right wings of the same metaphorical bird since Ronald Reagan was in office. Mind you, I kind of liked him. He was a charming presidential performer. He spoke relatively eloquently compared to, he was Shakespeare compared to Trump. But that's neither here nor there. Trump, I don't want to turn this into just a Trump bashing thing, but Trump, in my mind, is the pinnacle of this downward trajectory that whoever has been in control of the levers and the machinations and strategery of the GOP, like, this is what they've led us to. Right now, as things stand, Trump may or may not be able to complete the process of running for office in the next presidential election, depending on which direction the Department of Justice plays all of this out. And mind you, again, to address an often thrown at me attempted insult from the right, I'm not blindly defending the left. So, I'm not blindly defending the DOJ. I'm not a statist. One of my earliest memes I ever shared was a remixed spin-off of the statism just teaches you to hate people for reasons that don't make sense meme. I made my own version of that. It was one of the very first memes I made. I don't even know how long ago. I think I've been discussing that since Reagan was in office. Statism doesn't make sense. Ethnostatism makes even less sense. And religious ethnostatism is just abhorrent. It's what America supposedly was fighting against when it separated itself from the religiously oppressive empire that was built on the backs of indigenous people. We've come full circle here in America. Then again, there's plenty of arguments to say that, and I agree with this to a certain extent, that all the most honorific and honorable sounding rationales for everything that happened in American history are mostly PR. The whitewashing of much more complicated, nuanced, and often not necessarily honorable causalities. I don't doubt it one bit. I've met the human species. Have you? I'm not here to call any group more evil than any other group. I'm here to remind everyone that the human species is a programmable creature. And there's already, there's a meme that's been around for ages already. It's not inherently wrong that you are programmable. That's just the way we evolved. And you're not inherently bad if you received toxic programming growing up. Toddlers do not know hate. They learn frustration, and then they learn coping mechanisms to all their irritants in their lives, all the frustrating aspects, all the things, and then they learn baggage, biases, intolerances, and hatreds. From who? Their family and their society around them. what matters at any given moment for any given individual is whether or not they are willing to do the work to transcend whatever programming they have been force-fed, whether it's left-wing or right-wing ideology. The most absurdly annoying aspect of this engineered right versus left, left versus right wedge issue, it is a double-barreled echo chamber of echo chambers, friends, is that y'all sound alike. I made this meme, I think before, or maybe right after Trump decided he was going to run for office. It's one of those Spider-Man from the old school cartoon where Spider-Man's pointing at himself, or another Spider-Man, or whatever it is. But when Americans accuse other Americans of being brainwashed, hello. Hashtag 2 wings, 1 bird. It's the most frustrating thing to see the right continually to escalate their hypocritical attack on the rights of all other minorities, whilst at the same time claiming to be freedom fighters, while at the same time claiming to question everything, while at the same time claiming to do the research, while at the same time claiming to be followers of the teachings of Christ. It is just as obnoxious to see the left, in its own ways and in its own sort of obnoxiously hypocritical fashion, pretend that they are superior to everyone on the right merely because of the engineered wedge issues, whilst also having problematic issues of corruption, hypocrisy, manipulation, etc. What's concerning to me is that in the journey from Ronald Reagan being in office to today, the most alarming pattern that has remained the most consistent is the ever-escalating, ever more normalized presumption, incorrect, I would argue, incorrect projection that somehow fighting each other, either figuratively or literally, is going to solve these problems. It's like that guy that strapped himself to a bunch of super deluxe heavy big gym weights and then jumped on a treadmill. Now, if you don't understand what's wrong with that, go look. I don't know what the video is called. I saw it recently, but I've seen examples of the same exact idea before in meme form. But I think this is a reel, but still, a meme is a meme. Memes existed before the internet, by the way. Because, again, there's so many people who think that the words mean what they mean now and have always meant that. And that's not true. Memes, a meme is a neuro-linguistic psychological concept that existed long before the internet or Photoshop or putting text on images, because it has to do with the transmission of information psychologically through the use of language. But I digress. The guy with the weights that he ties himself to these big, huge, giant weights, and the strongman competitions, they strap themselves to a train. Now, if the guy who's trying to pull the train or the airplane or the whatever it is, the bus, those big burly muscle man things, and they put on a harness and they strap themselves to a big tractor trailer bus, right? Or whatever it is. Something huge and heavy that you couldn't possibly move with your own hands. Now imagine if he then jumped on a treadmill. He's not going to go anywhere. Neither is the thing he's trying to pull. That's what frustrates me about this psychological shenanigans here in this country. Both sides, and the middle, and the unaffiliated are ever increasingly getting fed up with the malarkey. And there's malarkey to go around. There's malarkey coming out of all quarters. But no one ever wants to think, oh, it's my group that's contributing to the problem. And there's an overabundance of self-righteous conditioning in this country. My group is righteous and true. It's anyone who disagrees with my group that is suspect, potentially evil, and or unworthy of being understood, heard, listened to, engaged with, included, supported. I mean, it's absolute madness that the Republican Party claims to be the party of free market economies and yet is outraged at corporations for using their freedom in the market to choose to support the LGBTQ community. There's another absurdity of the same level, and it's more of a feature of the conspiracy theory community, which is much larger than just the right-wing political establishment, right? Because plenty of centrists and plenty of former leftists have fallen down these rabbit holes. But it's the same level of absurdity. And this is the one that really sticks in my craw. And I've encountered this so many times in private discussions and DMs, in conversation threads under people's posts, in unsolicited threatening messages from other people, on my social media platforms at various places, and in real life discussions, face to face, eyeball to eyeball. I have been told by blind faith believers of a varying number of conspiracy theories that I'm an idiot for not seeing that every corporate industry and every corporation out there is categorically and absolutely evil. And I mean like lizard people from other dimensions, demons from hell, baby-eating robots kind of evil. But those same people will bend over backwards and bury their heads in the sand when it comes to any kind of questioning or criticism of the gun industry. So, big pharma, evil. Big media, evil. Big profiteering on violence? No, they're saints. They're patriots. They are Christ's chosen warriors. That, dear friends, is some kind of madness. I don't know. Last time I checked, the gun industry is a wholly owned subsidiary of the military-industrial complex, which the last time I scanned through the vast plurality of inconsistent and otherwise often mutually exclusive conspiracy theory content, the military-industrial complex is at the root core of the problem. But just like blind faith zealots, most self-proclaimed conspiracy theory, quote-unquote, researchers who wave the critical thinking banner and wave the question everything banner and shout these prefabricated talking points about how you're an ignorant sheeple who cannot question your reality around you because you don't agree with their conspiracy theory content, they get triggered AF if you ask them simple, critical thinking questions. Questions like, ooh, all right, so you believe in this subset of conspiracy theory content from the spectrum of conspiracy theory content. Okay, and you're telling me you insist it's absolutely true. Okay, In that conspiracy theory content collection that you're clinging to, believing in, and re-sharing constantly, and judging others for not agreeing to, does it make some statement that the powerful evil elite, quote unquote, unilaterally and ubiquitously and universally control and manipulate all media? Yes, of course. Even Fox News. Okay. So if they control all media, how on earth can you trust any of the content that you've been finding on the internet using corporate developed algorithms? I'm sorry, but if the evil elite are so absolutely all powerful that they own every journalist, every actor on TV, every politician, how in the world can you expect me to then naively, blind-faithedly buy into any of the media that you found using corporate search algorithms on a corporate-owned internet that was originally developed by, checking notes, the military-industrial complex? Now, I realize that bounces right back on me because I am a voice on the internet. Again, I refer back to my absolutist thinking argument. No absolutist statement is ever absolutely true. That's my point. If absolutist statements were absolutely true, then, logically, it would be impossible to trust any conspiracy theory content because all of it must be artificially fabricated garbage content, controlled, created, produced, and distributed by the same evil elite that controls all the news outlets. If absolutist statements were absolutely true. But they're not. Therefore, I think it's a bit naive, and I'm not calling people names. I'm sharing my thoughts, insights, and concerns. I'm not judging people for getting sucked down the conspiracy theory ego traps, because that's what rabbit holes actually are. I'm sharing my thoughts about it after realizing rabbit holes and ego traps are like quicksand. And we were all born and raised in a massive quicksand pit. And it's up to us to realize we must extract ourselves from the quicksand and step outside of the pit in order to solve any of the problems caused by the reality of the quicksand pit. I don't know if my analogy works there or not, but that's how it came out. All right, I feel it's time to take a very brief break. Oh, I've been rambling a lot longer than I realized. Let's play one more track. Which one did we just play? Emergent Patterns Discordantly. Yeah, that's the one we played earlier. Let's play another one. Something equally, not too terribly long. Alchemical Android Anthro. A DJ Z Tech Step D&B 101 Remix Live to tape improvised performance from the Future Is Now album. There is no such thing as us versus them. I I know that's a bold statement. I'm not saying there's no such thing as us versus them ideological manipulation. Of course there is. And it's coming at us from all directions, friends. Even embedded and deeply sublimated in otherwise seemingly uplifting and positive sounding content. What I mean by there is no such thing as us versus them is that there is no them in the real world. There's only us. So we cannot segregate ourselves from each other. To do so, regardless of the excuse, whether it is race, gender, ethnicity, wealth, class, etc., it is to create a false ideological construct. And that's what most people think they mean when they say hack the matrix, tear down the matrix. I'm not saying they're wrong to want to liberate themselves from man-made ideology. I'm saying that's exactly what we must all do. But that is not the same as destroying the Matrix. Because the Matrix is not the man-made ideology. The Matrix is the divine grace that is whatever the mysterious thing that creates life in the first place. The Matrix is not a computer simulation. That's a postmodern deviation from the original term. And while I love the Matrix movies, isn't it fun and curious, and I've only just recently seen people noticing this, that in the beginning in the Matrix, they're revolting against the evil robots, and by the end, what happens? It's no longer about destroying the Matrix, is it? At the end, by the newest version of the movie. The newest release of the movie. And of course, it's hilarious and sad to see simultaneously some people, especially right-leaning conspiracy theorists, celebrate and praise the Matrix, even though they hate Hollywood because they're all evil baby eaters, and then not realize that the final episode of the Matrix or that the entire Matrix series was created by individuals, the two siblings who directed and created it all, have always been transgendered individuals. They've only just recently come out about it, right? And declared and made it clear about themselves. That's a whole nother cluster of things to discuss. But like one of the most egregious and annoying and dangerous hypocrisies of radicalized right-wing ethno-nationalist religious ideology, and everyone who is being drawn into that, whether they realize the extent of the meaning of those labels, is that they demand personal freedom and yet are willing to threaten death and destruction to anyone who cannot bend the knee to their religious dogma. I was literally just watching a video posted by someone who couldn't have been more than like 23, 24. So basically, like an absolute greenhorn noob, Johnny-come-lately to the situation. And this is from over a year ago, before the most recent explosion of vandalism and threats of violence against Target. Who were doing that. I mean, the people were doing this over a year ago. And he literally boasted about hunting, quote unquote, LGBTQ plus members and supporters. Now, I don't know for a fact, but something makes me lean towards the presumption, and I hate to assume. I'd love to go look it up and find out, but I also just don't want to invest the time and give the energy towards that content more than I've already have. But I won't be shocked at all if that individual and others who create content like it or speak opinions like that just happen to be supposed followers of Christ. If your preacher, if your pastor, if your guru, if your politician, if your parents, if your friends, if your community claims to be believers in and followers of the teachings of Christ, and yet they are triggered AF and willing to spew hate speech, insults, threats, intimidation, and the encroaching normalization, promoting the encroaching normalization of violence against minorities, disenfranchised folks, people other than them, people who don't look like them, people who don't pray like them, people who don't believe like them, then you, my dear friends, are the ones who have been manipulated. Those people are being, everyone is exposed to manipulation, but the most egregious, the most disgusting, the most offensive, the most urgently dangerous set of folks that have been programmed with manipulative neurolinguistic programming are those that claim to believe in and follow the teachings of the Prince of Peace, the pacifist who sacrificed himself and allowed the Roman government to kill him, whilst actively savoring, enjoying, promoting, flirting with, secretly fantasizing about, or overtly calling for acts of violence against those they cannot abide. That to me is, and always has been, in the nearly 3,000-year history of Christianity, in all of its various forms, egregious, outrageous, immoral, dead wrong. And should Jesus ever come back, and I don't think that the corpse of the dead person we identify as Jesus Christ, which, by the way, that was never his actual name, but that's a whole nother pin on the corkboard. Already talked about it before. We'll talk about it again. If that person in that body were to magically return today and not be a decomposing, weird, mindless, brain-eating zombie, but an actual, fully functioning, totally alive, capable of deploying his Merkaba by activating his full multidimensional chakra system and transmuting his corporeal body avatar into living sentient light and back again, if that individual were here right now, I assure you, I promise you, based on his own words and teachings, he would be helping, healing, consoling, feeding, housing those in need, regardless of political affiliation. And he would be standing up to and attempting to transmute and heal, not butcher and kill, not destroy, not own, or any of the things that the supposed Christian right wing is doing or fascinated with right now. He would be working to heal anyone and everyone, regardless of political affiliation, regardless of skin color, regardless of origin, regardless of self-professed religious affiliation, because Jesus wasn't a fucking Christian. Put a pin on the corkboard, discussed that in multiple episodes before, and I'm sure we'll come back full circle and discuss it in depth again. We will never solve the problems that we have created, and I say we because it's easy to blame the shadowy elite and the ultra rich and the extraterrestrials and the demons from hell. But I don't know. Content like that has been flowing for over 60 years in America in a postmodern sense. I have personally been engaging with, impartially reviewing, and having discussions about conspiracy theory content for over 30 years, since Ronald Reagan was in office. And yeah, I know, for those of you who can do math, I started really young. I started questioning reality, politics, organized religion as early as the age of 5. And no, I can't prove it. I don't have books or screenshots, but I assert that to you as my lived experience. I was giggling earlier because there's this meme going around that's obviously meant to mislead people and is an ego seduction trap. It's an ego honeypot. It's 2 images from the movie The Matrix. One, Keanu Reeves' character Neo first, waking up in the goo pod with all the things still attached to him and right before they all pop off. And the second one is, I forget whether the younger ones, the 2 brothers, was Tank or Dozer, but that really ripped dude whose older brother doesn't make it to the end of the movie, who's one of the operator guys, who was born in Zion, not in the Matrix. And the captions are people unplugging from the Matrix since, I forget, and there's a year, I forget if it's 2019 or 2020 or something like that. And then on the bottom one, which is the second image of the operator kid, I think his name was Dozer. Might have been Tank. Might have been something else. I'm terrible at that. I'm terrible at names, but I can see the dude's face. I can see the scene where where the image is taken from, playing out in my head. Can't remember the character's name. Or I know the name somewhere, but I just can't confirm which name is the right one. The bottom caption says, "Me since 2017." I've been seeing this making the rounds. I don't know if it's new or if this is its 3rd or 4th iteration. There's plenty of memes I've never seen before that are 5, 10, 15 years old that I'm just seeing for the first time. Likewise, there's plenty of memes and content out there in the internet that I've seen recycled, repackaged, regurgitated since I started being on the internet. But back to this meme. It's already inherently flawed, right? Because it's using the term The Matrix incorrectly, arguably on purpose. Then it's so pathetically obviously us versus them conditioning on a sort of sublimated and maybe sort of made into 3 levels of us versus them versus just 2 levels. But I'm special because I learned how to unplug from the Matrix back in 2019, and y'all just barely waking up now in 2020. And then there's all the other idiots who aren't awake at all. That is what that meme is conditioning people to think. Well, first of all, okay, so I saw this meme and I've been seeing it more and more, and I finally sort of wanted to see what some of the comments underneath one of them was, and people were dropping their years like a one-upmanship bragging contest. Oh, you've been awake since 2017. I woke up in 2010. Oh, you woke up in 2010. I was awake in 2000. Oh, you were awake in 2000. I was awake in 1998. That was the most, far back one. So I debated what year to put, because if I put too far back, people will just laugh at it even harder, because no one wants to think about a 6-year-old questioning the way society works and the way organized religion manipulates people, but there I was doing it. So I rounded up a little bit just to not sound too crazy, and I wrote 88. Can't wait to go back and visit that thread and see what people say. And then I'm going to have to address the critical issues with that meme. The misuse of the term matrix. The obvious, I'm better than you, and you might be a little bit better than those other idiots, but I'm still better than you, indoctrination. That's what that meme is, seducing people who want to love it and share it into thinking about themselves. I'm better than the idiots who are just barely waking up now. All right, let me take a big picture, zoom out. I don't want to... There's all this argumentation, which is really adorable and hilarious, because in the left versus right, right versus left, double-barrel echo chamber of the United States / Trumptopia, both sides are slam dunking on each other about being aware, about being awake. And so are the politically unaffiliated or politically affiliated spiritualists out there, because they take it a little extra level, right? Because they're spiritually awake. And I've said this before in the show, and I'll say it again. Pin on the corkboard. Find the other episodes where I talk about this to go in deeper dive, but I'm going to make a really bold statement here. Nobody is effing awake. Not in the true, authentic, original, ancient, indigenous, metaphysical, spiritual meaning of the term. And I'm going to lay this out as simply as I can. I think that's what the Jesus story, and yes, I'm well aware, because there's people who are like, oh, Jesus is fake because look at all these other people for thousands of years before him that supposedly had the exact same biography. Pin on the corkboard. I've already talked about it before. We'll come back, talk about it again. Let's just, for the sake of argument, say Jesus and his story is representative. And I don't want to minimize it to like allegory or symbology, but those things are involved. Let's say there really was a person somewhere in the general time frame that is implied. This story, based on his own words, not somebody else's interpretation of them, but my understanding of Christ's teachings. And before any Bible thumpers come at me like Johnny Come Lately's thinking I've never read the Bible, but I'm sorry, I read the Bible cover to cover before I got to high school, more than once. How old were you when I was doing that? How many times have you read the Bible cover to cover without anyone telling me what to think, without anyone indoctrinating me in how to interpret it? And not just any Bible, but, I would compare and contrast multiple different editions of the Bible going back beyond King James. It's a whole nother discussion. Christ is an example of transcendental enlightenment awakening. So is the Buddha, so is any of the other names from that list of people who supposedly have the same, going all the way back to Mithra and beyond. The atheist, dismissive, I hate religion, so I'm not going to think about anything spiritual response is, well, that obviously is just plagiarism and it's just a lie that's been repackaged and redistributed to control people. And arguably, yeah, there's elements of truth there. But one of the true things about manipulative content is that it needs things that are true in it to work. It's really hard to manipulate people with completely whole cloth, absolutely false narratives. It's got to have elements of truth in it in order to sell. But that's a whole nother discussion that we haven't really done a big deep dive into. Let's put a pin on the corkboard on the side of new things we got to remember to discuss later. let us, for the sake of argument, concede, give credence to the idea that Christ and Buddha and Mithra and everybody else whose story has to do with and ends with self-sacrifice and ascension, they are an example of, and it's meant not to tell us what to blindly believe. It isn't meant to tell us how to limit ourselves or how to judge others or how to control others or how to determine who is or is not worthy of being alive, which is what a lot of Christians are busy doing right now, aren't they? But rather, these examples of empathy, compassion, unconditional love, giving, sacrifice, forgiveness, spiritual practice, meditation, that culminate in the transfiguration, transmutation, and evolutionary liberation of the soul, body, mind paradigm into the next operational order of life. Now, we can get into an argument about whether or not all life is equal, blah, 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 based on my understanding, which is rooted in years, 30 plus years of open-minded critical analysis of multiple sources throughout, from all over the world, from all over history. And this is important here because I think it's critical. It's all fine and good to be really well informed about the details and the nuances and the differences between stuff or ideas or theories, but without direct, verifiable, repeatable, phenomenological experiences, it's kind of just fluff. So, my opinions, these real, radically unscripted, because I'm not really a radical. I'm just radically, I don't write scripts. I could. People have told me that I should. It doesn't work for me. I can write a script. I am writing scripts, actually, stage plays and movie scripts. But for this podcast, it doesn't function for me. Because I'm here not to speak a contrived, engineered statement, but to speak raw from the heart in a form that invokes my spiritual phenomenological experiences, that is rooted in my real phenomenological experiences that no one can tell me I'm faking about. Okay, so let me wrap up my concerns here. And where am I going with this? Just like it's egregiously outrageous that the Trumptopian ethno-Christian nationalist movement is riddled with hypocrisy, riddled with corruption, and being helped by a contingency of folks that are just going to deny it even exists, pin on the corkboard. There are problematic issues of the same kind over in the spiritual, transcendental, metaphysical space. There are way too many people claiming to have opened the third eye who have yet to schedule an appointment and use their Merkaba chariot of light to teleport themselves into my studio so we can talk about it. Now, it's got to be scheduled ahead of time. You can't just pop up in the middle of the night. But I want to meet someone who's actually been enlightened. I want to meet someone who's actually opened their third eye. And my criteria for that is not that you believe you have, or not that some guru has told you that you have after you've paid him for years and years to do whatever he does, but rather someone who can activate their full multi-tiered chakra system. And I say multi-tiered because there's more than just the 7 chakras, right? For each individual chakra in the standard, well-recognized 7 chakra system, there are a multitude of sub-chakras, but that's a whole nother discussion, pin on the corkboard. on the we need to come back in that and do a deep dive side, not on the we've already talked about it in various episodes before side of the board. So until someone, and theoretically, if they're out there, they don't even need to be listening to my podcast. They'll pick up on my vibe, which I'm attempting to telekinetically transmit around the world, independent of whoever's listening to my podcast, until someone like that contacts me, schedules an appointment, and then deploys their Merkaba and materializes from right here in front of me in my studio in the form of living light, which then condenses back down into standard material body avatar form. I'm going to have to run with the notion that none of those people claiming that they are enlightened and have opened their third eye have actually achieved so. They might have had epiphanies. They might have had other phenomena, which I'm not knee-jerkedly denying. Why am I making this statement? Because I've been accused, quite ridiculously, of having claimed my own enlightenment. Never have I ever said, I am enlightened and my third eye is open. Just like I've never said that I choose to hate Trump or that I believe blindly in Joe Biden. And yet that's what a lot of Johnny-come-lately, knee-jerk, prefab talking point trolls keep spewing at me, which makes me giggle. It makes me giggle because either someone's paying you to do that or you don't hear yourself regurgitating neurolinguistically programmed talking points that you've absorbed from the content you're so adamantly defending. And I say that with love, yo. I don't say that to belittle anyone. I'm saying, hello, here is a mirror. Take a look. And then if you don't like what you see, stop being that way because you can choose otherwise. My concern is that none of these things that we've addressed facilitate a solution. Accusing people of being evil demons or religious idiots or whatever, none of that solves the problems. Shooting each other will not solve the problem. A civil war will not solve the problem. A world war will not solve the problem. Why? Said it before, I'll say it 1,000 times again. The root cause is transcendental, metaphysical, spiritual, collective trauma that needs healing. And to the best of my understanding, none of those tools that everyone is strapping themselves up with are tools for healing. And that, dear friends, is the entire purpose of the public discourse that I try to bring about in this show. So if you're new to the show, please, oh please, do consider this your daily dose of public discourse, to be participatory in. Like, come and join the discussion. Come on down to Sprecher.com/user/Mr. Zeppo and give yourself a guided tour through the various special segment mini-series of the Almost Daily ZenCast. Obviously, if you're not into video games, you don't need to sit through the video game podcast. Especially, not only if you're not into video games, but you don't want to ever join any of the clubs in the video. Obviously, you don't need to listen to that. That's just sort of like an extra tangential little project. And if you're not really interested in cannabis, then don't listen to the cannabis stuff, right? But if you are engaged and intrigued by the thesis that I'm trying to create and share and refine through public discussion, then I strongly encourage you to check out the Good Morning Trumptopia episodes, the main branch of the show, the Almost Daily ZenCast, today's Nuggets of Zen, and kind of critically, the unauthorized and explicit reading episodes. And to close things up, final programming note, I will be dropping, probably not today, but in the coming, sometime this weekend, maybe I might push it over till Monday. I will be dropping a programming note episode just to sort of help orient new listeners to the structure and layout of the podcast and its various sub-segments or special series. And I will continue to ever so slowly grind away at the work of reorganizing the show so that you can find each of the special segments in its own podcast. And you can find them all together here on this link I keep promoting. Please come on by, support the show. If you're listening to the show on another platform and you do not want to create an account over on Sprecher.com, that's cool. I respect that. Then please, oh please, stand by, as in the not-too-distant future, I will be distributing the newly spun-out special series sideshows on the same platforms that the main series is distributed on. And for now, I'll be sure to drop new episodes of each of the segments here on the Almost Daily ZenCast main show feed, or, because it's all RSS feed driven. And I'll probably just keep doing that forever. Anyways, I feel like I've sputtered out of control and run out of things to say. But dear friends, let us unite, not to destroy each other, to see who is most righteous, because that's what humanity's been doing for the last 10,000 years or so. And it's gotten us here. And this ain't no utopia of peace, love, and grooviness, is it? I would argue it is also not a dystopia. Not yet. Fun little fact. And there's a lot of dystopia memes about basically saying something to the effect of, fuck this dystopia, or I won't allow this dystopia, or isn't it weird how we live in a dystopia but everyone pretends. Fun fact about the literal definition of the term dystopia. It is defined as an imagined future society, riddled with injustices for all. An imagined future society, riddled with injustices for all. Now, it cannot be denied that there's a lot of injustice in the world. And it cuts all kinds of every which way. It must also be pointed out there's a lot of made-up imaginary injustices in this world. We can take a deep dive into the imaginary projected injustices that Trump believes he's suffering, or that the radicalized ethno-nationalist white Christian movement believes they are suffering. I'll close on this point. It is absurd. It was hilarious, but it's no longer so because it's escalating to places that are dangerous and potentially soon to be violent. Oh, I'm sorry. That was ridiculous. It's already violent. But this notion that American Christians are fighting for freedom and yet claiming that the left, the LGBTQ, the progressives are oppressing them, that's just beyond the pale. Which party is literally legislating religious dogma at the state and federal level? I saw another meme which is really just patently offensive and it really alarming, that claims, quite incorrectly, that, quote, diversity is secret code for eliminating all white people. That diversity means, and I don't have the meme in front of me, so forgive me if I'm not getting it 100% accurate. Someone's going to tell me I'm making things up or trying to misrepresent the meme. No, to the best of my recollection, not having it directly in front of me, it says diversity is code for destroying all white people. Diversity means no white nations, no white cities, no white communities, no white people. This is a patently false claim. And it is obvious neurolinguistic normalization of ethno-nationalism. Because what is a white community that demands its own white city-state? Let's see, who was the last group of people that did that? Oh, gee, I don't know, the Nazis? And I'm not calling anybody a Nazi. I don't do that. I don't call people conspiracy theorists to be pejorative and put them down. I refer to people who have self-identified themselves as conspiracy theory researchers because that's what they call themselves. Okay? So, what was the last big cultural movement that demanded all white communities, all white schools, all white homes, all white families, all white cities, villages, towns, whatever, and an all white national identity? I don't know. Oh yeah, that's right, the Nazis. And the biggest, like, mind-boggling, obvious dumbfuckery, pardon the F-bomb, is that the people who most eagerly accuse others of being Nazis, of being tyrants, of being oppressive, are almost always supporting political action that is tyrannically oppressive of others in an ethno-nationalist kind of way. We're not going to solve that problem by going to war, folks. If we go to war, if we have a civil war here in the United States between the left and the right, the only winner will be the industry that profiteers on violence.
And that is what I've got to say about that. As always, thank you kindly for listening. This has been the Almost Daily ZenCast with your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zappa. Until next time, may peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart.
Go forth and heal yourselves and help each other heal. And step 1 is a deep dive into questioning everything you assume, cling to, and argue with others about. And trust me, that's hard to do. How do I know it's hard to do? I've been doing it my whole life. I do it every day. I ask myself, what the fuck am I doing? Pardon the F-bomb. Do I really think X, Y, and Z are the truth and J, Q, and W are the ego traps? Question everything, folks, and you start with the things you take for granted. You start with the things you think that you believe you are willing to fight others against. That's where the questioning must always start. You're not really questioning everything if all you're doing is questioning other people's assertions without actually listening to their response. Until next time, friends, go be good human beings to each other.